So we're talking the 2024 halving. I believe that going into or soon after the 2024 halving, I expect one Bitcoin to be in the $100,000 range or above.
So today I'm joined by Wall Street analyst turned Bitcoin trader Vays. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on, Will.
Yeah, and so right away we need to talk about Bitcoin. Obviously, it's trading below 10,000 right now, and it's looking pretty bearish. What do you see in the next few weeks?
I'm a little concerned right now. I know I've been flipping a lot over the last, I would say, month and a half about whether it's bullish or bearish, but that's what the charts have been telling me. And right now, once we crossed under 10,000, my metrics for trading turned pretty bearish. My weekly scale is still in this neutral zone, but the daily and all sub-daily timeframes, they're pretty much bearish right now. I was always skeptical of this exponential rise from 4,000 all the way to 14. And I think we need a substantial correction in order to reset and set the path for new all-time highs.
And if there was such a correction, how long do you reckon it would take to recover? I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, but what do you think?
It really depends on how the correction takes place. Normally, markets bottom in two ways. Either it's a V-shaped bottom where things crash and go up very quickly, or things get stuck at the lows for a long time. So here are the examples of both. When gold finally ended its 25-year bear market from 1980, it got stuck between 200 and 250 for 4 to 5 years, to the point where people forgot and stopped caring about gold. And then it went up from 250 all the way to under 2 grand. The S&P 500 bottomed very differently in 2009 after the financial crisis, where we fell straight down in pretty much the last quarter of the year, and then immediately went straight up, and the market has been on a tear since, going to new all-time highs. Bitcoin did a bit of both in the last bear market. We fell really hard from like 300 to 400 down to 150, but then we got stuck in this $250, $300 area for 9 months. This time around, I felt like neither of those two things happened. Yes, we did fall from 6 to 3, and then we got stuck in that $3,000 to $4,000 range for only about a month and a half, or maybe 2 months. I didn't feel like it was enough. So I was never comfortable with the way Bitcoin bottomed, and I'm still expecting more pain. That pain could come in a sharp drop in prices back to the $4,000 range, maybe even the $2,000 range, or it can come in prolonged pain under $10,000, where we get stuck in this zone between 5,000 and 10,000 for the next several years. Either of those scenarios would sufficiently bottom out the market.
And it's interesting you're talking about market cycles and how it's performed in the past. There's been a lot of talk about Bitcoin following fractals from 2015. Do you pay these any heed? Do you think there's a correlation?
I do, mostly, and it's not the fact that it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin just does these cycles very, very fast. I've compared Bitcoin to the dot-com crisis a lot, the dot-com bubble. I've compared it to that. There's really not that many bubbles. Bubbles don't happen very often in such broad markets. I've tried comparing Bitcoin to the gold and silver bubble. Bitcoin has lots of similarities there. And because most bubbles have a somewhat regular structure, because the psychology of the people's trading and speculating is the same, whether it was during the dot-com bubble, whether it was during the commodities bubble, whether it was during the real estate bubble. But it's hard to like price out real estate. It's not a very liquid asset. It's the psychology of the traders, and it's just easy to compare Bitcoin's current bear market, or, well, maybe it's not in a bear market anymore, but the Bitcoin bear market of 2018, it was so easy to compare it to the Bitcoin bear market of 2015 because you're already looking at the Bitcoin chart. All you got to do is just slide it over a little bit, and it's just easier to do than comparing it to the dot-com bubble, which is my other favorite comparison And my third favorite comparison is comparing it to the gold and silver bubbles of 2010, 2011.
Mm-hmm. And you did just mention that we might not be out of a bear market. You said this back in June. You don't think the crypto winter is over. Do you still stand by this now?
I do, because I have certain definitions. What changes a trend from a bull market to a bear market? I think there is consensus on the fact that Bitcoin was in a bear market. I don't think there's any debate on that, right? From the 2017 top in December at just under 20,000 down to 3,000, which took place late 2018. There's no debate that that was a bear market. That bear market was actually pretty short. It was significantly shorter in time than the 2014-15 bear market. And when your bear market is historically short in time, it's really difficult to be absolutely certain you're in a bull market until a new all-time high is made. Same thing with the S&P 500, right? The S&P 500 topped at 1,500 points in 2000. It then double topped at 1,500, might have been 1,300, but that vicinity, that vicinity of 13 to 1,500, I can probably, scroll over on my charts just to get the exact prices. I have charts in front of me here. Yeah, so I have the numbers. So it was 1,500 in 2000. There was a double top at 1,500 again, 1,540. We beat it by 40 points in 2007. Now, the bear market of the real estate bubble was a lot shorter. It took us, when we topped in 2000, the S&P bottomed at the end of 2002, going into 2003, and we topped in early 2000. So that was 2.5 years. The top in October of 2007 bottomed out in March 2009. So that was almost half the time. That was less than 2 years. And a lot of people didn't admit, and to this day do not admit, that S&P is in a bull market, right? But it was pretty obvious that it wasn't a bull market when it broke the prior all-time high of 1,500, and now we're sitting here at 3,000, and it doubled since then. So when your bear market is shorter than it normally is, it takes a little while to admit it, and that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? Because even I thought that the S&P was not going to go to new all-time highs until it actually did, okay? And that's when I became one of the biggest bulls in the S&P 500 sometime around 2012, 2013. I was a little late to the party, but people have been making fun of me since, and the S&P has been on the greatest 10-year streak probably in 100 years, okay? So there's nothing wrong with being late to the party when your bear market did not perform as it historically does in both price and time. I didn't feel like it fell far enough to teach people a lesson, and I didn't feel like it lasted long enough to teach people a lesson of investing in scammy ICOs in 2017. And that is why I am so hesitant in being this crazy bull of Bitcoin and the crypto space.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'd argue the opposite, that 20,000, a drop from 20,000 to 3,000 is quite substantial, really. And I get what you mean with the length. I think I'd agree. It wasn't quite so long. But do you think if we weren't in a bull market, we would be seeing these kind of exponential parabolic moves?
Yes, it's possible. And what gives me confidence that we could be in a bull cycle again is the fact that this time around Bitcoin is rising, and it's not only rising against the dollar, it's rising against the altcoins. And that is very, very important. I had my price criteria of when I would absolutely be a big Bitcoin bull. And that price criteria, my most optimistic target was 5,000. My middle target was 3,000. And my most pessimistic target was in the $1,500 range. The way we got to that 3,000 I really felt we were going to hit my most pessimistic target.
Mm-hmm.
We may not. It doesn't look like we will. That's okay. You know, we hit my other two targets. Very few people were calling for a $5,000 Bitcoin when the market turned in early 2018, and I even hit my middle target of 3,000. But from a time perspective, I felt we did it in unreasonably early. So my time, we were completely ahead. My price, I think I did okay on that, even though the trolls will definitely disagree. But my other criteria was as follows. The next bull market needs to only be Bitcoin. It's not going to be Bitcoin and altcoins.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin needs to separate from the altcoins to be in another, in order to attempt another bubble top, it needs a new all-time high. In order to change, in order for Bitcoin to change the world, it needs to just be Bitcoin, not the crypto space. And that is actually happening. So I thought this could happen at the very lows. I didn't think Bitcoin would turn and separate from the altcoins inside a bull market, but that is a criteria. Bitcoin needs to separate from the altcoins. So as long as I see the Bitcoin dominance rising, it's almost at 70, it needs to get to 80, it needs to get to 90, it needs to get to 95. As I see that happening, it encourages me, it makes me more and more optimistic that the bull market is back.
Okay, fair. And you've mentioned that you believe that Bitcoin could go lower, and you've even made a bet about it. You said that it could fall to $2,000 before the 2024 halving. What's your reasoning behind this?
That bet, that's not the bet that I actually have on the books. That was more of a joke bet.
Yeah, okay.
My reasoning is this. There's a couple of folds. So at the time that I made the bet, the price of Bitcoin was 4,000. So and I said, hey, Bitcoin will, if Bitcoin falls to 2,000, you owe me a lot of Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin doesn't do that, then I owe you a lot of USD after the 2024 halving. It's basically a bet that doesn't cost me much, because if Bitcoin survives past the 2024 halving, I expect one Bitcoin to be worth a lot of money. So it's not going to cost me a lot. But if Bitcoin, but all I need to win the bet is a 50% correction in Bitcoin. And the bet is like almost always open, right? It's just that my target is a 50% correction. So when Bitcoin went to 14,000, people are like, oh, I want to take you up on that bet. I'm like, great, let's take 50% from 14,000. So that means you owe me 100 Bitcoins if we fall to $7,000, right? So it's a 50% correction, not a hard cap $2,000, right? So I will always bet on a 50% correction in Bitcoin. And I'm also expecting Bitcoin to be worth a lot of money after the next halving, not necessarily this one.
Okay, fair enough. And in terms of a price prediction for the next halving, what do you think? You say a lot of money, but what does that mean?
So we're talking the 2024 halving. Mm-hmm. I believe that going into or soon after the 2024 halving, I expect one Bitcoin to be in the $100,000 range or above. I don't think it will be less than that, because if it is, it's going significantly lower. But that's my view on the next halving, not this one. I think this one is going to be a struggle. I think Bitcoin has its stretches. This particular rally still concerns me. It feels like it's all internal money that's already been in Bitcoin. It doesn't feel like that 2016, 2017, when a lot of outsiders came into the space. People keep talking about how institutional investors are getting in, institutional investors are getting in. Institutional investors don't cause exponential rises in the price. That's when that's when the unqualified masses are running in. So this particular run-up is just really weird to me, but I do think there will be another mass entry of non-institutional investors piling into Bitcoin, and I'm expecting that to take place sometime within the next 5 years, and that can easily send a Bitcoin from 20,000 to over 100,000 in a matter of months.
And we've seen actually the backed futures testing phase for Bitcoin futures begin on Monday. Do you think this is going to see an institutional push into the market further? And will that bring mass adoption in itself?
Maybe a little. I still think that there are critical questions that people are not asking. Custody, protecting that Bitcoin. Fidelity just opened a facility where institutions can buy Bitcoin, and Fidelity is holding on to that Bitcoin and protects them. Imagine what happens if Fidelity gets hacked and that Bitcoin is stolen. You will see a mass exodus of these institutions, because they're like, well, how can we invest in something that can be hacked, right? So I'm sure Fidelity knows what they're doing, but we all thought Binance knew what they were doing too, right? They were supposed to be the exchange that is the best and knows it all. And then the next thing you know, they get hacked. And then after 2 or 3 days of no sleep, the CEO says something that makes it sound like he doesn't even know what a blockchain is, when he's when someone on his team says, hey, maybe we can reverse the transactions, right? Like it shows complete and utter incompetence that is something that was even uttered at a meeting, right? Like, wow, these are the people that are protecting the Bitcoin. So there's still a lot of questions. Like, if I was running a big institutional firm, I would be very careful in investing in Bitcoin. I would rather, trade the CME futures. If I felt that the Bitcoin price would rise over the next 6 months based on my analysis, I'd rather, take the cash equivalent on that rise than take a potential, risk of being fired as the CEO of the financial institution because I invested a bunch of money in Bitcoin that ended up getting hacked. So even I wouldn't take a chance at storing my own Bitcoin at my own hedge fund, right? Because, what if someone breaks into the safe, steals my private key, right? It's there is something to be said about the centralized version of investing, in that I know my Apple stock is safe. Now, people will disagree. People will talk about the conspiracy of the DTCC and that I don't actually own that Apple stock and some private corporation owns the Apple stock and I don't. And the answer is my main goal is to make money as a hedge fund, as a financial institution. My main goal is to keep people employed and not to get myself in trouble, not to get myself get fired, and not to blow up the company. And if I bet too much on Bitcoin and I'm right about the price of Bitcoin, but I'm wrong about how to protect that Bitcoin, that's not a risk I may want to take, which is why I may rather take the price appreciation of that Bitcoin without having any responsibility of actually protecting that Bitcoin.
Mainstream media it pushed the last bull run, it's fair to say. Do you think, what point do you reckon we'll see the media take notice again? We've had comments from Donald Trump, but we haven't had any real mainstream media interest yet. When will they jump in, do you think? And will it make an impact this time?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I think the media is now confused with Bitcoin and all of these altcoins, because all of these altcoins are being pushed. And so that's a really good question. Right now, Bitcoin is the big topic on the Hill. It's a big topic with the regulators. And we will see, the IRS is starting to take this very, very seriously. So there's lots of things right now that are putting Bitcoin in the news, but this isn't positive, right, for the average person. So a lot of the things that are about Bitcoin in the news aren't exactly the media pushing people into rushing in and buy it. It's more like, hey, this is a little troublesome. Trump doesn't like it. And I mean, people always say, hey, all news is good news. But in this case, it's a little bit challenging because I can certainly see the US and the regulators really cracking down on Bitcoin usage, Bitcoin possession, Bitcoin transfers. And some people don't want to take that chance. They don't want to take a chance on that side of even like remotely potentially breaking the law, because the hassle to deal with that is huge, right? I mean, every job application you fill out, right? Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever done this and that? And, you know, they could freeze your passport and now you can't go anywhere. And that is becoming a serious thing. Like, I haven't really talked about it much because I don't want to panic people, but I've recently saw a presentation and it never even crossed my mind that the industry of travel did not even exist 60, 70 years ago. It's a brand new industry because before commercial airplanes, no one can travel anywhere on vacation, right? You just kind of stay at home. But travel as an industry is a brand new industry globally, historically, and it's moving up the ranks. And I travel 10 months a year, and there are reports right now that, you know, Justin Sun might have been, you know, detained in China and they're like revoking his travel privileges. I don't know if it's true, if it's a rumor, but that seems to be the current rumor as to why that dinner with Warren Buffett was canceled. And I'm not a big fan of, you know, governments and tyrannical governments and all that stuff, but they have a, you know, a big hammer they can play, right? If they don't like what you're doing, they cut your travel privileges. And imagine if like me, like I'm all about travel. Like I hate being in one place more than a week. That's serious, right? That's not something I want to endanger because that's what like makes me enjoy my life. So the governments have a lot of sticks they can kind of wave there in order to deter people. It's unfortunate, but I'm also a very realistic person. And you have to be mindful of that. So if the US government and the European government really start to crack down on people being fans of crypto, people like the average Bitcoin person underestimates how much people will be scared of getting into Bitcoin.
Yeah, and you know, thinking of Donald Trump's comments and also his reach, do you think first of all, do you think the comments would harm Bitcoin? And second of all, do you think that Bitcoin could ever be banned?
Well, Bitcoin can't be banned technologically, right? Bitcoin will always work, but people will. I mean, if the government declares Bitcoin to be only used for terrorist financing and not a single institution can sell you Bitcoin in the US.
Yeah.
You know, Coinbase has to close shop or move overseas. Bakkt has to shut down. The CME futures have to shut down. This becomes very, very challenging for an American to buy Bitcoin. And now an American knows that if he goes into the street to buy it, he's breaking the law just by buying it. Like right now, if you go into the street and buy Bitcoin in cash, you're not actually breaking the law. The person selling it to you may be a money transmitter and he's breaking the law, but as a buyer, you're not. Again, it's the marijuana situation, right? Mm-hmm. If you go into the street to buy marijuana, you know that the guy selling it to you is way more likely to get arrested than you are as a buyer. But even when it was illegal, you as a buyer can get arrested. Right now, if marijuana is legal, the guy selling it to you without a license can get arrested. But you as a buyer have zero risk of buying marijuana because it's legal. The same thing applies if Bitcoin becomes illegal to even buy. Now you know you're breaking the law by buying it in the US. And that's not going to kill Bitcoin, but it will certainly be felt by the Bitcoin community as to why the prices aren't going up anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, and exactly, and they kind of did the same thing with the petro, right? So there was an executive order banning citizens of the US from purchasing it, and that's quite a scary thing in itself. Although that could be overridden by Senate, I guess. But Donald Trump also mentioned Libra, and it's also been quite a divisive aspect within the crypto community. What do you think? Is it bad for the industry? Is it good for the industry?
Well, it depends on what industry. So Are we talking about the crypto space, or are we talking about, the traditional economics?
So crypto space, definitely, yeah.
I think it's more good than bad for the crypto space from multiple fronts. First of all, it gets people talking about digital currencies where Bitcoin is, head and shoulders above the rest. Second, if people are going to start using Libra, they will realize the only difference between Libra and the US dollar is that you don't have a cash component. And in order to achieve the cash component, you now go and have to use Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So I think Libra is more good than bad for the crypto space. Is Libra more good than bad for the traditional money space? It's probably more bad from the government's perspective. I mean, government is if I was running the government, if I put myself in the shoes of someone that wants to control and tell other people what to do, I would also be skeptical of the Libra token, but not for the reasons that they are skeptical of the Libra token, right? So they are saying that a private company can't be trusted with this kind of responsibility because Facebook has broken all kinds of privacy issues and stuff. And for me, that's kind of misplaced. I would much rather trust a private entity than the government, because a private entity like Facebook, even if they can see what I do, even if they know my history, my search history, all they can do is profit from advertising to me. When the government knows everything that you do, they put you in jail, they can do all kinds of stuff, right? Like, here's what Facebook can do. Facebook can't put me in a cage. And since Facebook can't put me in a cage, I would much rather have Facebook do anything than the government do it, right? From that regard. Like, it's always the governments that, Facebook doesn't start wars with other countries, right? Governments do. So Facebook wants to cooperate with other countries in order to make more money. So I always trust the private sector more than the public sector, even though they break my privacy. But at the same time, one of the main reasons they break my privacy is because the government tells them to break my privacy, because they want the back doors, right? So that's the argument. On the other side, yeah, the government can certainly lose their monopoly on money if the private company can do it better. And I don't know if Facebook can or can't do it better. I can tell you this for sure. Facebook couldn't care less about money laundering laws. Only the government cares about money laundering laws. Facebook doesn't. And I think money laundering laws are just immoral. A person should be able to do whatever they like with their money. And therefore, Facebook has to comply with money laundering laws and spy on me, not because Facebook wants to do it, but because the government will make them do it. So that's kind of my view on the situation. Facebook would love to have someone work in America and send money to the family in the Philippines for zero cost. Facebook would love to do that. The government will not let them, because they will put all kinds of barriers there so that it's not at zero cost, because you have to do all this compliance to make sure its money laundering laws are being met. So that's my problem with it, with the whole situation. Ideally, Bitcoin would be the global money that everyone uses. And I don't know if that would be better or worse. We're assuming it's better. The argument is that inflation and Keynesianism is bad, and the last 100 years of monetary policy has been a complete disaster. And my only pushback on that is the amount of technological innovation we've had in the last 100 years is unmatched in human history, in my opinion. Maybe it's because I'm living in the last 100 years, right? But I don't know if this kind of innovation would have been possible on the gold standard. I just don't know, right? I can't tell you what did not happen. Maybe it would have been better. Maybe we would have had the internet in 1950, not 1990, if we were on the gold standard. But it's also possible that we wouldn't have the internet at all today. That is also a possibility. So you live with what you have. I would love for the world to try the Bitcoin standard for the next 100 years and see how it goes.
Okay, and finally, and digressing very slightly, you're a self-confessed Bitcoin maximalist, and you've been a notable detractor of altcoins. Is there any altcoins you think maybe have a future?
There might be altcoins that have a future, but not as investments, right? Like, I'm gonna take it back to gold and silver, right? So I was a big gold and silver bug, and probably about 7 years ago, I was convinced that silver was a better investment than gold. It was underpriced against gold. It had a longer and more robust history of actually being money over gold, and silver had all of its benefits as to you're better off investing in silver. And in reality, after learning and reading certain books, the realization is this: gold as of the 20th century, 19th century even, right? With the advent of electricity and technology, gold no longer needed a micropayment because you can back fiat currency by gold. And by doing that, you no longer need the monetary aspect of silver because gold can scale. If the world goes to a gold standard, with our current technology of internet and electricity, gold scales. You can go and pay for 1 second of data downloads with gold because it'll scale. It can be subdivided with technology. And that means that while silver is still going to be useful to the world, its premium as money is going to deteriorate over time as more and more people around the world realize that it will never be money again, unless we go backwards and we no longer have electricity and gold is no longer divisible with technology, which I don't expect. So just like silver will always be used, its premium versus gold is always going to continue to decrease. Now, maybe one day gold will have no monetary premium either if Bitcoin takes it over. But right now, people still value gold as, historically money and value. Like 95% of gold's value is not its industrial value, but its financial premium. And that financial premium could actually increase in gold if people value gold as money. But in silver, it's going to be increasing a lot slower. So just because some altcoins will survive, they are absolutely terrible investments versus Bitcoin, the way silver is a terrible investment versus gold. It may not be a terrible investment versus the dollar, but if you're going to buy silver for the same reason you're buying gold, it's insane. You have to go and buy gold. So if you're going to buy an altcoin for the same reasons you're going to buy Bitcoin, that's insane. Bitcoin will outperform every single altcoin over the long run. Now, you can go ahead and speculate on them in the short term to make more money or Bitcoin, but as far as their usage goes, it's not going to fly. I mean, Ethereum has shown that, hey, people continue to want these dApps. I don't know why, but they do. So what did smart programmers do? They built the liquid sidechain on Bitcoin. It's not very popular because they don't have marketing. They don't print their own money. But like sooner or later, people will realize that everything you can do on Ethereum, everything you can do on EOS, you can do it on a side chain of Bitcoin. No one is advertising this. No one is doing workshops on this. No one is putting conferences on this, but the functionality is there. And sooner or later, people will realize it, and all of them will go away. All of these altcoins are competing with each other. They're not actually competing with Bitcoin because they can't. Bitcoin is decentralized, it's immutable, and it's stable. That's it.
Okay, and on that note, thank you, Tone Vays, for joining me. Thanks a lot for your time. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you.